Now that you've written the first draft of your first essay, I want to spend a little bit of time reflecting on that experience and also debunking some of the myths that students have about writing and writing courses and their skills as writers. So before we start talking about some of the myths that surround academic writing, I want you to reflect and ask yourself how you would rate the essay you wrote in the beginning of this module. I didn't give you very many instructions. There weren't a lot of parameters. And the reason that I did that is because I want to be able to determine in the beginning of the class what you think an academic essay looks like, what you think an academic essay sounds like, the things that you include, the things you exclude, your tone, who you think your audience is, and all of those things that go into writing an essay. I didn't give any instructions, and I think that drove some of you crazy, and I can understand that. I'm a person that needs instructions as well. I want to be told exactly what I need to do to be successful. So as you reflect on how you would rate the essay you wrote in the beginning of the module, you probably wouldn't rate it very high, and you also probably wouldn't rate the experience of writing the essay very high because, again, you weren't given very much time and you weren't given very many instructions. And that can be really, really frustrating when you are asked just to sit down and write something kind of blind in the dark and you're not given much time and you're not given direction. I want you to think about what you learned from this experience, and hopefully what you learned from this experience is that good writing doesn't happen quickly. Good writing doesn't happen in a couple of days or in an hour before the assignment's due. Good writing takes time, it takes planning, it takes thought, it takes revision and editing and peer review. And so what I wanted you to get out of this first draft of the first essay is to understand that writing is a lengthy process and it involves many steps, and it's not something, at least if you're doing it well, it's not something that you can just sit down and kind of bang out on the keyboard and then be done. And I also want you to think about how this experience has compared to previous writing experiences. And even though you didn't have very much time and you didn't have very much direction, it's probably, and I did that on purpose, it's probably still pretty comparable to some of your other experiences where you weren't given very much time or you didn't allow yourself very much time to write a really good essay. And I would say probably the vast majority of you felt like you were under pressure, you felt very unsure about what you were doing, and you just kind of felt like you were stumbling around in the dark. And I didn't mean to play a dirty trick on you, but that's kind of how I wanted you to feel. Because what we're going to talk about in this class is how we need to focus our efforts not on just the writing of the essay, but the planning of the essay and also the revision and the editing of the essay. The writing part, what you did for this first assignment, is just a teeny tiny little bitty piece of what you need to do. So I want you just to reflect on the experience and how the experience made you feel. Probably not great. You probably weren't super satisfied with your results. And lucky for y'all, this is just a first draft. And the rest of this module we'll spend some time polishing and perfecting that draft so that by the end, when you turn in your final draft, it's exactly what it needs to be. After you reflect on your experiences, I want you to think about some statements that students have made in the past and the validity of these statements. And these may be statements that you yourself think. These may be preconceived ideas that you yourself have about writing and academic writing and writing for a college audience. And the first statement says, a good writer should be able to sit down and write a paper straight through without stopping. And I'm here to tell you I'm a good writer, but I absolutely cannot sit down without having planned, without having thought about it, without having carefully and at length considered my audience and my purpose and my tone and my plan. What am I going to put in the introductory paragraph? What are my body paragraphs going to be about? What am I going to say in the conclusion? What points am I trying to make? A good writer spends lots and lots of time developing their essay. They don't sit out and start with word 1 and end with word 1000 and then save it and submit it for grading. That's not how it works. And so if you feel like you're a bad writer because you can't sit down and write an essay from beginning to end without stopping, then you shouldn't feel that way, because good writing doesn't happen in one sitting. Good writing doesn't happen in one session. I would say a good essay can't be developed even in one day. The next statement, writing is a skill that anyone can learn with practice. That is 1,000,000,000% true. Just like if you were learning to cook, or you were learning to swim, or you were learning to weld, not everyone has those skills innately. None of us are born learning how to write an essay, but we can develop those skills and we can practice those skills. And there are rules to follow that if we follow them, that help us to produce good academic writing. So if you've come into this class and you feel like you're not 100%, you're not a good writer, and you have the attitude of, I don't know what I'm doing. I was never a good writer. I'm never successful. I want you to understand that anyone can learn to write well, to be a good writer, with practice and patience. I've also had students say, I'll never be good at writing because I make too many mistakes in spelling, grammar, and punctuation. And again, that's false. Good writing is about ideas. Good writing is about conveying your message. And absolutely a part of that is spelling, grammar, and punctuation. But what I want you to understand is that spelling, grammar, and punctuation are things that can be fixed. There are clear rules to follow. They're not arbitrary, even though a lot of you probably feel like that, especially when it comes to commas. Like, where does the comma go? I don't know. That's the biggest issue. There are rules to follow. We're going to go over the rules for spelling, grammar, and punctuation in this class. And if we don't hit on the topic that you need, if you're not sure how to use a semicolon and we don't talk about the semicolon enough in this class, there are a million resources out there on the internet for you to use to understand how to use these things, and understand the elements of grammar and punctuation and good sentence structure. You have to take the initiative to look for those resources. You have to take the initiative to proofread your paper really carefully. If you know that you write lots and lots of run-on sentences, then when you revise and when you edit, you know you have to go back and look for lots and lots of run-on sentences, and you've got to fix them. And that might take extra time. So not being good at spelling, grammar, and punctuation doesn't make you a bad writer. It just makes you a writer who has to spend a little more time fixing those errors before you submit it. Another statement, because I dislike writing, I always start a paper at the last minute. We'll stop doing that, all right? There is no bigger enemy to the writer than procrastination. And I know many of you aren't comfortable with the writing process and you don't like it. And because you don't like it, you wait until the last minute. And I'm here to tell you, and I will say this 1,000,000 times, good writing does not happen at the last minute. You have to start early. You have to give yourself time to plan. You have to give yourself time to think about it. You need to sleep on it. And I mean that very literally. You need to start a draft. You need to make a draft. And then you need to take a day. You need to sleep on it. Let your mind kind of work out some of those kinks and problems as you sleep and as you concentrate on other things. Good writing doesn't happen at the last minute. And it's kind of, students who don't feel like they're good writers should really start way, way ahead of time. But that's the opposite of what happens. So stop waiting until the last minute, especially if you dislike writing. You're not going to like it any better if you wait until the last minute, because you're not going to be confident in what you've written. You're not going to feel prepared, and then it'll just kind of perpetuate that cycle of disliking what you're doing. I've always done poorly in English, and I don't expect that to change. Again, I promise it will change with hard work and focus. And if you're not a good writer, if you're not a comfortable writer, if doesn't come natural to you, then yeah, you're going to have to work a little bit harder. You're going to have to focus a little bit more. but it'll come if you work hard and if you focus. I'm not good at math. I'm great with words. I'm horrible at math. It doesn't mean I couldn't pass a math course. I had passed many math courses. I just had to work a little bit harder at it. And I had to focus on my problems. And I had to know ahead of time that I was going to have to spend some extra time working on this particular problem. So if you've done poorly in English in the past, I want you to completely forget about that. We're starting fresh here. You need to shake that off. I'm going to give you the tools you need to be a successful writer, not just in this course, but in all of your college courses. So let the past stay in the past. Right now, day 1, you're a good writer, and you're going to acquire the tools you need to go forward and do well.